The church smelled like roses and rain that morning, the kind of damp cold that seeps through every layer of black cloth. People whispered in corners, pretending to mourn but waiting for the will to be read. My father stood stiff near the casket, his face like carved stone, jaw locked, eyes burning holes through the floor. When the lawyer cleared his throat and announced that my grandfather's entire estate, the businesses, the land, the family home, would go to the rightful heir, excluding his grandson, the room fell into a suffocating silence. My father turned to me, his voice low but loud enough for every relative to hear. "You get nothing," he said, each word sharp as glass. "And you deserve to die." The echo of his words hung in the air long after he walked out. I didn't follow. I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, as my aunt stared in horror, and my cousins looked away like they'd witnessed a public execution. Outside, November wind sliced through my suit. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh or collapse. The only person who approached me was my uncle, smooth, charming, always the peacemaker of the family. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his expression calm and almost too kind. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this," he said, pulling a worn, yellowed envelope from his coat pocket. "Don't read it here. Wait until you're alone." I nodded, confused but desperate for any connection to the man who'd practically raised me. My uncle gave me a reassuring squeeze, then walked back toward the church, his polished shoes clicking against the stone like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something I couldn't see coming. That night, the house felt heavier than usual, too quiet, too still. The envelope sat on my desk like it was breathing. I stared at it for a long time before finally cutting it open with a letter opener. Inside, there was a safe deposit key taped to a folded sheet of paper, a small USB drive, and a faint scent of old paper and smoke. The handwriting on the letter trembled with age, but the words were deliberate, almost carved into the page. "If you're reading this, it means the house won. The name devoured the blood. Go to box 317, take the truth. Your father didn't disown you. He's hiding you. Because the person who killed me sits at our table." My hands went numb. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I read the lines again, slower this time, feeling each word dig deeper. Killed him? My grandfather had died in his sleep. At least, that's what everyone said. Heart failure, peaceful, no suspicion. But the letter made it sound like something far darker had been buried with him. "Your father didn't disown you. He's hiding you." The words tore through me. Hiding me from what or who? I dropped the letter and grabbed my phone, my first instinct to call my father, to demand an explanation. But as soon as my thumb hovered over his name, I stopped. If the letter was true, if he was hiding me from something, then calling him could expose me to whatever he feared. The thought sent a chill crawling down my spine. I looked at the USB drive, unmarked, ordinary, and wondered what kind of truth could fit inside it. Whatever it was, Grandpa had risked everything to send it to me. That's when I heard the sound, a low rumble outside my window. I pulled the curtain back and froze. A dark car sat parked across the street, engine running, headlights off. My pulse spiked. Someone was in there, watching. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then the driver's side window rolled down just enough for a phone to appear. A camera flash lit up the night, a brief, blinding burst, aimed directly at my window. My instincts screamed at me to turn off the lights, so I did. When I looked back, the car was gone. No taillights, no sound. Just the echo of my own breathing in the dark. I turned the letter over, searching for something, anything that might tell me what to do next. At the bottom, almost hidden beneath a crease, were 3 faded words written in a smaller, weaker hand. Trust, but verify. It felt like advice, or a warning. My grandfather had always told me that trust was currency in this family, and everyone was broke. I read the line one more time, my mind spinning through every possible meaning. Trust who? Verify what? Then my eyes caught something else, faint but unmistakable. A final line I'd somehow missed before. Pressed into the paper with a shaking pen. Start with your uncle. I stared at those words until they blurred. The same uncle who'd comforted me outside the church. The same one who handed me this letter. The good one. My breath caught. If Grandpa was right, if the person who killed him sat at our table, then I had just shaken hands with a murderer. The house creaked behind me, wood settling or maybe something else. My reflection in the window looked pale, ghost-like. Outside, the night was too quiet again, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I folded the letter, locked it in my desk drawer, and slipped the key and USB into my jacket pocket. Whatever truth Grandpa wanted me to find was buried deep, and every instinct told me that digging it up might kill me. But I couldn't stop now, because the only thing more terrifying than finding out the truth was living my whole life never knowing it. The bank lobby smelled of dust and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to secrets. I hadn't been inside a place like this in years. Marble floors, brass rails polished to a mirror, the kind of cold silence that makes you feel watched. The clerk behind the counter asked for my ID, her polite smile never touching her eyes. When she disappeared into the back vault, my heart started pounding in that slow, heavy way it does before something irreversible happens. A few minutes later, she returned, pushing a small gray safe deposit box onto the counter. Its metal sides were scratched and worn, its tag marked with the number 317, the one my grandfather had written in his letter. I signed a form, followed her into the viewing room, and waited until she closed the door behind me. The air in the room was cold and stale. I pulled the box closer and opened the latch. Inside lay a collection of objects that didn't belong together, at least not at first glance. A black leather notebook, its cover embossed with the single word, "Hush," in fading gold letters. A stack of papers bound with a rubber band yellowed at the edges. A passport photo of my uncle, grainy, younger, stamped with a name that wasn't his. And an unmarked manila envelope sealed tight, across which was written in my grandfather's shaky handwriting, "Play me last." I took the papers first. They weren't random. They were financial ledgers, records of transactions stretching back months before my grandfather's death. Each line told a story in numbers, large cash withdrawals, payments made to a company I didn't recognize, and something that made my blood run cold, a series of wire transfers to a PR firm labeled Crisis Containment Retainer, dated 2 weeks before his death. Who hires a crisis team before a supposed heart attack? I flipped open the Hush notebook next. It was filled with scribbles, notes, and what looked like drafts of letters my grandfather had never sent. Some were addressed to my father, others to my uncle. A few were signed only with his initials. One entry stopped me cold. The estate cannot fall into his hands. He will use it to bury the truth. Protect the boy. If anything happens, Box 317 will tell him everything. Protect the boy. I felt that phrase settle heavy in my chest. The boy was me. But from what? From whom? I stared at the USB drive I'd brought from the letter the night before. I knew I should wait, maybe take it somewhere safe, but curiosity outweighed caution. I packed up the box and drove to the public library, the only place I could think of with computers that weren't connected to my home network. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I slipped into a corner terminal and plugged the drive in. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a single file appeared, Message 1 MP4. I clicked play. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, my grandfather. Not the frail man I remembered in the hospital bed, but sharp, alert, eyes like winter glass. He was sitting at his desk, the same one in the family study, a lamp casting a soft circle of light around him. "If my heart stops," he said, voice trembling but steady, "it won't be an accident. There are things this family has buried that will destroy everything we've built. The heir," he paused, looking directly into the camera, "will receive everything only if they expose the murderer. If they fail, the estate dissolves into the victim's fund. Choose justice, not blood." The video ended abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. My throat tightened, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The murderer? I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, a dying man's delusion, but deep down I knew better. The letter, the key, the ledgers, all pointed to something deliberate, something planned. Then I heard it, a sound behind me. Footsteps, slow, measured, closing in. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The reflection in the dark computer screen showed the tall outline of a man behind me. I turned, heart jumping into my throat. It was my father. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner, colder, his expression a blend of anger and fear. Behind him, 2 uniformed security guards lingered near the door. "Shut that off," he ordered, his voice tight and low. I hesitated. "Why? What is this, Dad?" "What's going on?" He took a step forward, eyes flicking to the USB still plugged into the port. "He'll see you," he whispered. My skin prickled. "Who will?" He looked over his shoulder as if expecting someone to walk in. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Your uncle. He's been waiting for you to open that box." I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was being ridiculous, but the fear in his voice was real, too real. "You're not making sense," I said. "Uncle Tom gave me the letter himself." My father's eyes darkened. "Of course he did. He wanted to know if you'd take the bait." "The bait?" He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "That letter wasn't for you, it was for him. To see what you'd do. He's been watching since the funeral. That's why I told you to stay away. Why I said those things. You think I wanted to disown you? I was trying to make you invisible." My voice broke. "You told me I deserved to die." He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with eyes full of regret and fear. "I said it because he was there," he whispered. "Because he needed to believe I'd cut you off." The guards shifted uncomfortably. My father glanced at them, then back at me. "You need to leave. Right now. Don't go home. Don't trust anyone. And for God's sake, don't open the second envelope." I stood frozen, staring at the man who had destroyed me at the funeral, now trembling in front of me like a hunted animal. Before I could respond, he reached out, gripped my shoulder, and said in a low, desperate voice, "He killed my father. And he won't stop until you're gone too." Then he turned and walked out, leaving me alone with a computer still humming and a truth too heavy to breathe under. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications, news alerts, emails, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. My uncle had filed an emergency injunction against me. The headlines were already spinning. Family feud over $1 million estate escalates into lawsuit. My uncle, the family's golden son, was painted as the victim, and me the disgraced heir, as the ungrateful troublemaker trying to rewrite a dead man's will. By noon, I was standing outside the courthouse, cameras flashing like lightning. My uncle stood at the top of the steps, perfectly composed in his tailored navy suit. When I walked past, he placed a hand on my shoulder for the photographers, that same charming smile plastered across his face. To the crowd, it looked like a moment of family reconciliation. To me, it felt like being touched by poison. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," he whispered, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But you brought this on yourself." Inside, the courtroom felt suffocating, rows of strangers whispering about the family scandal like it was a soap opera. My lawyer, a young but sharp woman named Ava, leaned close to me and said quietly, "He's trying to freeze you before you can move. This injunction isn't about money, it's about control." She was right. The complaint accused me of stealing private documents, defamation, and emotional distress. In reality, he wanted one thing: to stop me from digging deeper into what was in that box. We filed a counter motion immediately, motion to compel discovery. If my grandfather's estate was in question, we would demand every financial record, every video, every line of communication. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by legal documents and silence so deep it felt like a void. I replayed the video from the USB in my head again and again, Grandpa's final words haunting me. "Choose justice, not blood." But how do you choose justice when blood is all that's left? My phone buzzed, a message request from someone I didn't know. The profile photo showed a driveway and half a car bumper. The message read, "I have dashcam footage from the night your grandfather died. You'll want to see this." My hands shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" No answer, just another message with a file attachment. I hesitated, then opened it. The video started in darkness. Rain pattered against a windshield, and the faint glow of a porch light flickered in the distance. Then a figure appeared, crossing the yard and entering the side door of my grandfather's house. The timestamp matched the night of his death, the night he supposedly passed peacefully in his sleep. The person was wearing a rain jacket, hood up, carrying what looked like a medical bag. At first, there was nothing unusual, until the figure reached for the doorknob. That's when I saw it. The flash of a ring under the porch light. A heavy gold signet ring engraved with our family crest. My breath caught in my throat. Only 2 people in the family wore that ring, my father and my uncle. I replayed the clip, pausing, zooming, frame by frame. When the figure turned slightly toward the light, I saw it. A thin, white scar slicing across the left hand. My father had one too, but his was on the right. The realization hit me like a punch. The man in the video wasn't my father. It was my uncle. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. My uncle sat across from me, smiling faintly like a man who already knew he'd won. When the judge asked for evidence to support our counterclaim, I slid a printed photo across the table, a still from a charity gala 6 months ago. My uncle stood in a tuxedo, hand raised in a toast, cuff just high enough to show the same scar on his left hand. The judge leaned forward, studying the photo. "Counselor, do you have confirmation that this is the same individual from the footage?" Ava stood, voice calm but sharp. "We believe this connects directly to the circumstances of Mr. Lark's death and contradicts prior testimony provided by the plaintiff," the gallery murmured. My uncle didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head and smiled that politician's smile. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "I cut that hand-chopping wood for my father's winter stove because my brother never showed up when Dad asked for help." He looked at me then, his tone turning soft, almost pitying. "You see, my nephew has a vivid imagination. He's grieving. And grief makes people desperate." The words slithered across the room. I could feel everyone turning, wondering if maybe I was crazy. Then he leaned back, pretending to sigh. "You know why his father hates him?" he said to the court, voice almost tender. "Because he killed our father's favorite thing, his faith in the family." The courtroom spun around me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father, sitting 2 rows behind, clenched his fists so tight his knuckles turned white. When our eyes met, he mouthed silently, "He's turning you against me. Don't let him." Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced down, unknown number. I opened the message under the table. It was a photo of my bedroom. The angle was from the doorway, taken that night. On the pillow, perfectly centered, lay a knife. The caption read, "Stop digging." My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at my uncle. He was watching me, calm, unreadable, and for the first time, I understood something that chilled me to the bone. He didn't just want the money. He wanted silence, and I had just given him a reason to make sure I never spoke again. The police officer behind the desk barely looked up when I handed him my phone. He scrolled through the photo, the knife on my pillow, the message that said, "Stop digging," then sighed and said the words I'd heard too many times already. "We'll open a case and log it. But unless there's evidence of forced entry or physical harm, there's not much we can do." His tone was flat, rehearsed, indifferent. To him, it was just another domestic dispute gone ugly. To me, it was a death threat signed in silence. When I left the station, the sky was bleeding into dusk, and the streetlights were flickering on one by one. Every shadow looked like a person watching. Every passing car felt like it was following too long. At home, I double-locked the door and pulled the blinds shut. The apartment that once felt safe now felt like a trap. My mind kept replaying the footage of my uncle in the rain, the scar on his hand, the smirk in court. The way he'd whispered, "You brought this on yourself." I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still one step ahead, that every move I made was already expected. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were shaking too hard to drink. Then I remembered the second envelope from the deposit box, the one labeled, "Only when he comes for you." I stared at it for a long time. Every instinct told me not to open it. My father's warning echoed in my head. Don't open the second envelope. But fear and curiosity are twin flames. One burns the other until you can't tell which is which. I tore the seal. Inside was another USB drive and a short note written in my grandfather's hand. "If you're in danger, it means the first truth hurt the wrong man. The next truth will break the right one." My heart hammered as I plugged the drive into my laptop. The file was another video. I hit play. The screen showed my grandfather's study, the same leather chair, the old lamp, the bourbon bottle that always sat on the desk. But this time the angle was different, as if recorded from a hidden camera in the corner of the room. The date stamp was from 3 nights before his death. My uncle walked in first, wearing a dark coat, glancing around before sitting. He poured himself a drink, checked his watch, and from his pocket pulled out a small glass vial, clear liquid inside. He unscrewed the cap, tilted it, and let 2 drops fall into the bourbon bottle. I felt my stomach twist. A few minutes later, my father entered the room. He looked tired, almost defeated. "Why are you here?" he asked. My uncle smiled. Peace offering. He poured 2 glasses, sliding one toward my father. We've both lost enough. My father hesitated, then sat. What do you want? The company, my uncle said simply. Dad's sick, the paperwork's half done. If you transfer it now, we can avoid the board fighting over succession. My father's voice broke slightly. He wanted you to have half. My uncle leaned forward. I don't do halves. Sign it over and I'll take care of the rest. You can focus on your son. I know you think he's your legacy, but let's be honest, he's soft. He won't survive in this family. Something dark passed across my father's face. He's not soft, he said, his voice low. He's decent. There's a difference, my uncle smirked. Decency doesn't win wars, brother. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then my father took the pen, signed the papers, and pushed them across the desk. There, you win. My uncle smiled, lifted his glass, and said, To family. My father clinked glasses, but only pretended to sip. The video froze on the moment my uncle set his drink down and left. Then the image shifted. My grandfather appeared, frail but awake, entering the room moments later. He picked up the same glass my uncle had tampered with, sniffed it, frowned, and then looked straight into the hidden camera as if he knew it was there. If you're watching this, his voice cracked, then it means I was right. One son poisoned my bottle. The other sold his soul to protect a child who thinks he's unloved. The screen went black. I sat frozen, breath shallow, staring at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. My grandfather had known. He had recorded his own murder before it happened. A knock at the door shattered the silence. 3 short raps. My pulse spiked. I didn't move. Another knock, harder this time. I crept to the peephole and saw my father. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling. We need to talk, he said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was broken. He stepped inside, looking around nervously before sitting at the edge of the couch. You saw the video, didn't you? I nodded, too numb to speak. He rubbed his face, breathing hard. You think I wanted to say those things to you? That I meant them? I said them because he was watching. Your uncle. He's been listening to everything. Cameras, microphones, even the funeral. He had people recording. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. Why? Why me? He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw guilt mixed with love. Because you're not supposed to exist, he said quietly. You're not my heir by blood. You're my heir by choice. And he's your father. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I stared at him, unable to breathe. What are you saying? He looked down. Your mother was his. She left him before you were born. He couldn't stand the thought of me raising his son. That's why he hated you. That's why he killed Dad, because the will named you as the rightful heir. Not him. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Every memory, every cold stare, every cruel word rearranged itself into something I could finally see clearly. My uncle's obsession wasn't greed. It was possession. My father stood, tears streaking down his face. He'll come for you next. You have to finish what your grandfather started. Take him down. He moved toward the door, but before he left, he turned back to me. No matter what you find, remember this, I may not be your blood, but I chose you, and I'd do it again. When he was gone, I collapsed onto the couch, shaking. The truth had finally surfaced, but it wasn't freedom. It was fire. Because now I understood what Grandpa meant in that first letter. The person who killed me sits at our table, and I had just learned that I'd been born on the wrong side of it. The courthouse was overflowing with reporters, cameras, and the kind of manufactured outrage that only comes when America smells blood. Headlines had already crowned it, "The Trial of the Family That Ate Itself." When I walked into the courtroom that morning, flashes exploded in my face, and microphones were shoved at my chin. Do you have anything to say to your uncle? One reporter yelled. I didn't answer. I couldn't, my heart was beating too loudly. Inside, the air was thick with whispers, the kind that cling to you like humidity. My uncle sat at the plaintiff's table, still polished, still smiling, but the cracks in that smile were starting to show. My father sat behind me, pale and quiet, his hands trembling slightly on the bench. The judge entered, gavel in hand, eyes weary. This hearing, she began, will address the unsealing of the final addendum to the late Harold Lark's will. And just like that, the room stopped breathing. The clerk carried the sealed packet to the bench, its wax still intact. It had been locked away for months, an envelope no one could touch until today. The judge broke the seal, unfolded the papers, and read in silence. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. "According to this document," she said slowly, "your grandfather named you, Mr. Lark, as the moral executor of his estate. That means you, and you alone, hold the authority to decide what happens next." I felt every eye in the room turn to me. The judge continued reading aloud, her voice steady, but her words echoing like thunder. "The executor must choose one of two paths. 1. Inherit everything and bury the truth. 2. Expose the murderer and dissolve the estate entirely into the victim's fund. There is no third option." The words seemed to hang suspended in the air. My uncle's confident expression faltered, just for a second. My father reached forward from behind me, placing a shaking hand on my back. A simple touch, but it carried every apology he'd never spoken. The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Lark," she said softly. "The choice is yours," I stood. My throat was dry, but my voice came out clear, steady, and louder than I expected. "I choose the truth." A wave of gasps rolled through the room. The bailiff wheeled in a TV monitor, the same one we'd used for evidence earlier. I handed Ava the USB drives, both of them. When the first video began to play, you could feel the tension shift. On the screen, Grandpa's study flickered into view. The audience watched as my uncle poured the bourbon, the vial flashing briefly in his hand. The sound of liquid hitting glass filled the courtroom like thunder. Then came my father's voice, tired but kind. They toasted. My uncle smiled that same smile, the same one he wore right now, and the screen froze on his face. No one moved. Then the second clip began. Grandpa finding the tampered bottle, leaning toward the hidden camera, whispering the confession that had haunted me for weeks. "One son poisoned my bottle. The other sold his soul to protect a child who thinks he's unloved." The silence broke. Gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs. My uncle lunged to his feet. "That footage is fake," he shouted. "Deepfake edited, manipulated." But no one believed him anymore. The judge motioned to the bailiff, and within seconds, 2 officers were on him. As they pulled his hands behind his back, he twisted his head toward me, eyes wild, voice low but venomous. "I told him to cut you off because you were mine." The words struck harder than a slap. My knees nearly gave out. My father made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and then crumpled into his seat. "I knew," he whispered hoarsely. "I knew he'd come for you if he knew the truth. So I became the villain you could hate. To keep you alive." His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, the courtroom, the cameras, the crowd, the judge, disappeared. It was just me and him, 2 broken pieces finally fitting together in a story neither of us chose. When the noise died down, the judge looked at me again. "Executor," she said softly. "Your final act?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the first letter, the one that started everything. It was worn now, creased from too many nights of trembling hands. There, faintly under the original message, I noticed something I had never seen before. A hidden line pressed faintly beneath the fold. My grandfather's final words, "End the name to save the blood." I looked at the judge, at the family name etched on the courtroom wall, at the crest embossed on every document, every scandal, every wound. "I dissolve it," I said quietly. "All of it. Every dollar, every property, every title. Let it go to the victim's fund. Let the Lark name die here." The judge nodded slowly. "So ordered." The sound of the gavel cracked through the air, sharp and final, like thunder announcing the end of a storm. Cameras clicked. Reporters surged. My uncle screamed something I couldn't hear as the officers dragged him away. My father sat slumped in the gallery, tears streaming freely for the first time in his life. When it was finally over, I walked out of the courtroom into sunlight so bright it hurt my eyes. In my hand, I held only a single piece of paper, the decree that had ended a dynasty. On the courthouse steps, the crowd parted as a courier approached me. "Delivery for you," he said. The envelope was old, its edges yellowed, postmarked before my grandfather's death. I opened it slowly, my heart pounding. Inside was one last letter. "If you did the impossible, there's a third door. The fund will receive the fortune. But you receive what I never gave my sons, a life without our last name. Take it, run, be free. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it inside my coat. The car waiting at the curb, sleek, black, a remnant of the family empire, stood idle, but I didn't get in. Instead, I turned down the sidewalk. My father followed, walking beside me in silence. For the first time in years, neither of us had to play a part. There was no crest on the ring, no guards at the gate, no weight of legacy pressing on our shoulders. Just two men walking toward something that finally felt like peace. As we reached the corner, I heard my grandfather's voice again in my mind, softer now, fading like an echo carried by wind. Truth is the only inheritance that doesn't rot, and for the first time I believed him.